generally, the way I approach life is I think to myself, what do I want to do? I ask myself, there's a great question. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I'm loving this. I don't normally get this sort of depth of question. This is great.
Welcome back to Crisis What Crisis, the podcast that aims to guide you towards a more resilient life and whatever it might throw at you. If this is your first time with us, then do please hit subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. And please do leave us a review. It really helps make sure that these, I hope, useful conversations are shared as widely as possible. A very special episode to kick off the new year with a truly one-off guest. In fact, I'm sat here with the perfect person to take us into 2025. Paul McKenna is not just a world-renowned hypnotherapist, he's a one-man self-help powerhouse, a best-selling author whose books have sold over 10 million copies in 32 languages, and a sought-after behavioural scientist who's helped thousands, including celebrities, athletes, business leaders, overcome their greatest challenges. From working as a DJ in Topshop to TV hypnotist here in the US to personal development guru and successful businessman, Paul's has been a truly astonishing career. And now with his new book, Power Manifesting, he is on a mission to empower as many people as possible to lead a more productive life. With his signature blend of neuro-linguistic programming and psychological techniques, Paul has an unshakable belief in the power of the mind and its often untapped potential. Today, he joins us to share his insights on navigating crises, achieving resilience and unlocking our true potential. Paul McKenna, welcome to Crisis What Crisis.
Great to see you, Andy.
How are you?
I'm overall fantastic. Yeah, how about you? Look well. How's you?
I'm all right. I'm very excited and pleased to have you with us today. I should point out as we start that you and I have known each other the thick end of 30 years.
Yeah, I know. Amazing.
During that time, among your many other successes, you've published, I think, over 25 books.
Yeah.
I have published one 30 years ago, and even that was co-written.
Yeah.
So, Paul, I sit here from a serious position of weakness when it comes to productivity. Where's it come from? How do you do it?
Well, I years ago I decided to write a self-help book because I'd read lots of them and I thought everybody's saying the same sort of thing. I've got something to say. And I wrote a book called Change Your Life in 7 Days. And I thought, maybe it will sell a few copies. And the thing absolutely slammed all over the world. It was the #1 bestseller in many countries. And so my publishers said, you're not going anywhere, mate. We'll have a few more of these. And so I thought, well, as a hypnotherapist, I've helped people to lose weight, to get confident, to sleep. Maybe I should write about these and in a sort of popular style. And as they became successful, I became enthusiastic about it. But generally, the way I approach life is I think to myself, what do I want to do? I ask myself, there's a great question. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Right? The American motivational speakers use this because it takes the limiters off. And I go, when I was a radio DJ, but interested in hypnosis, I thought, well, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? And I went, actually, I'd be a hypnotist. I'd be on television. I'd travel the world. I'd work with the elites from sports, business, the arts. I would in those days make cassettes, and get my hypnotherapy techniques out that way. So that's kind of where it begins, because I think you've got to have a purpose in life. In fact, Viktor Frankl, the legendary psychiatrist, said, purpose is the cornerstone of good mental health. So your purpose could be something small like, I think to myself, how am I going to make my wife really happy today? What am I going to do? Or how am I going to solve this problem? Or if I think in terms of my big purpose, it's how can I bring more hypnotherapy to the world?
And his purpose, of course, or his book, Man's Search for Meaning, was born out of crisis.
Absolutely.
Subject to this podcast. So you hold to the view that crisis, perhaps, I don't know whether you agree with this, serious kind of health issues to one side. There's always an opportunity therein?
Absolutely, yeah. Very often a crisis can be an opportunity for learning, for development. I mean, people say to me, you probably don't have many problems. And, I go, no, I've got problems. I see them as challenges. That's how you learn and develop. But if I think back on some of the most awful things that have happened in my life, I wouldn't have signed up for them. But there was a massive learning came out of that, and sometimes even a set of techniques that I could then help other people with, and use as part of my journey and my business, so commercially as well.
Yeah, well, I'm interested to talk about that. But you started the explanation of your productivity quite late in your life there. You were a Capital Radio DJ when you discovered or the door opened towards hypnotism. Let's talk about that. But before we get there, because your mind was ready for that, what do you attribute that to? It's a question that we ask a lot, when we have these conversations. Is that parenting? Is that upbringing? Is it environment? Mix of what is it for you?
Well, I think it's all of those. I was very lucky to have, my mother's still with us, so, well, at least I hope she is. I spoke to her yesterday. But I had great parents who I didn't really realise until later how much they'd encouraged me and instilled their values. They're very kind people. They've got a sense of humour, but a great work ethic. And my mother said, I only heard this recently. When I went to school, she said to the teacher, that's all right, the teacher said, my school said, well, he'll either end up in Brick Lane as a salesman or he'll be Prime Minister, And I had in other words, I was going to be
There's still time for Prime Minister, by the way.
Well, definitely at this rate.
It's quite a revolving door, so stand there long enough.
Yeah. So, I think what it was also... I remember one of my school reports said I'd never amount to anything, right? Now, this is really interesting because some people would be crushed by that. And again, I think it might be my nature to thought, right, I'll show you, yeah? And so all of this is my revenge, in a sense.
Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I suppose when somebody... I'm open to feedback, but I thought it was kind of just mean-spirited. And, there is a part of me that thinks, right,
I'll show you.
Say I can't do it. Well, and that, I think, is that's an innate characteristic. But, also I believe in environment, shaping people, and very much the opportunity to change yourself. I mean, that's what I do for a living is I help people to change themselves. And, I like to think I've been able to do that myself over the years. I used to be quite a shy, sort of nerdy kid. In speaking publicly would be something that would make me kind of frightened, and I certainly wouldn't want to be very open. I was quite closed, and as I got older, I realised and used personal development techniques on myself that I could actually change the way I felt, the way I thought, and ultimately the results that I get.
So tell me about that early moment. Then you're a Capital Radio DJ, and this window opens up towards hypnotism. Just tell us what happened, and because that is a proper kind of sliding door moment in your life.
Well, what had happened is I'd been working at a smaller local radio station, and I went to interview the local hypnotist, and I'd had a bad day, right? I'd broken up with my girlfriend. I'd had a row with my boss, the apartment where I was living, the people were keeping me up at night. And I sat down and the guy said, rather than you interview me, I think I need to hypnotise you because you look so stressed. And I benevolently, sceptically though, said, knock yourself out. And I sat back and I became so relaxed, all my burdens and stress lifted away and I could suddenly see things clearly. And it felt like I'd had my eyes closed for 5 minutes. But it had been half an hour. And I came out of the trance and I said, that is great. Could you lend me a book on this? And so I took the book away and I started, and I read it. I thought, I see how this works. And initially I used it for entertainment. I'd be at a party and I'd say, I'm learning about hypnosis. And someone would say, oh, won't work on me. And I go, well, shall we find out? And then, I'd have them up dancing like a ballerina. And then I also used it to help people, quit smoking and lose weight and things like that. But the transition to becoming full-time hypnotist from a DJ happened when I was at Capital Radio. And I'd been reading a self-help book, and I did a process whereby you go off into the imagined future, given where you are right now, and see where you're going to be. And I went, oh my word, I'll be sort of older, bolder, more paranoid, and I'll still be a DJ. What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? I'd be a hypnotist and I'd be on, etc. And then
It's crystal clear to you.
well, you get it sometimes, and sometimes you get a sense of it. So, but yeah, sometimes it's like bam, it's crystal clear. So I'm walking down Tottenham Court Road, and I suddenly went, "We own a theatre. Capital Radio owns a theatre. I make the promos, saying see Pink Floyd in concerts, etc. Hang on, this could all. There's a synergy here." So I went to the big boss of Capital Radio, Richard Park. And I believe you get these sort of destiny moments where you get backing. Like, so, if you're in a shop, your customers back you. If you're a politician, your voters back you. So I went in to see Richard and I said, look, we own a theatre. I make these promos. Is there any chance a radio station might get behind me if I put a show on in London? And he sat back in his chair and he went, I'll back you. And I thought, God, I had to go and borrow a year's wages from the bank and still take a massive punt. But in that moment, I had the backing of somebody with power, and that proved to be a pivotal moment. I started helping friends who wanted to quit smoking or wanted to get over a phobia, and it worked really well. And so I just sort of became more interested in that. And Do
you remember the first time you put it to work? In that other way.
It was to help a friend quit smoking, and he went out like a light, and then he, forgive the pun, and he came back and he went, God, I'm smoking. I said, I offered him some cigarette, but no thanks, I don't smoke. And I thought, oh my God, this really works. So then what happened was I started, I thought I'll get a group together in a hotel of people, and I'll just do a weekend of motivational stuff. Motivational hypnosis. And I remember my promoter at the time said, you're selling out, 2,000 seaters, but you want to sit for a weekend with 10 people in a hotel and sort their problems out and jolly them up. I don't understand it. And I said, I said, it's not a commercial thing. I love doing this. And so eventually there came a point, it was around 2000 when I thought, I'm going to have to make a choice. I'm going to have to either continue as an entertainer or go more seriously into hypnotherapy and look at it, the science of it all. And of course, because I'm quite a compulsive person, I then became obsessed with that. And so I initially treated the sort of things that most hypnotists do: quitting smoking, losing weight, phobias, sleep, etc. Then moved into much more hardcore stuff. And so for the last sort of 10 years, I've worked with people, war veterans, rape victims, bereavement cases, who are at the sharp end of crisis, frankly.
So at that point then, when you decided that crossroads, no, I'm heading that way, did you your new book is focused on manifestation, right? The power manifesting.
Yeah.
Now, perhaps you weren't doing it consciously at that point. I don't know where you were on the sort of manifestation kind of element of your work.
Yeah.
But did you manifest? Right, it's that path,
yes.
And that's what it's going to be.
Yes.
Do you recognise that now as being?
I did. I did do it at the time, but I just didn't tell anybody I did manifesting. In fact, one of my friends last year said to me, he said, you tend to, get what you want when you set out to achieve something. I said, well, yeah, most of the time. And he said, but you do manifesting, don't you? I said, yeah. He said, well, why don't you write about it? Why don't you admit you're a manifester? So I thought, why not? Because even though manifesting has this new agey association to it, the way I do it is quite scientific. And if you look at the science, I wouldn't say it's overwhelming, but if you look at, say, quantum physics, you look at modern psychology, and you look at all the various theories there are as to why manifesting works, and manifesting is essentially imagining something and then bringing it into reality, the theories are all very interesting and fairly sound.
So I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about your other techniques, hypnosis, of course, NLP, havening.
It's a safe haven, yeah.
I want to talk about all of those. But at the core of all of this is your belief that the mind is largely, misunderstood, but more importantly, untapped. So just give me your big picture view.
Okay.
On the opportunity that you say we all have.
Well, I suppose if you go back to sort of childhood, we get programmed, if you like. Aristotle famously said, "Show me the boy before he's 7 and I'll show you the man." And so the things that are said to us by authority figures, the moments of emotional intensity when we make a decision about ourselves or life, kind of set up our character and our sense of possibility. Now, I think that, so some of those things are good, like we learn how to tie our shoelaces or shake hands, and then we store the program in the unconscious. But we also might learn something unhelpful. For example, the largest phobia in the world now is public speaking. You stand up in front of the class, somebody points out your mistakes, people giggle, so you feel nervous and judged, right? And then you carry that into later life. So in terms of potential, what I think is that when I ask people, who here, when I'm talking to a group, is 100% of their true potential? And nobody ever says yes. And the reason is because they either hold themselves back because they don't think they're worthy, they're frightened of too much success, they've got a self-sabotage belief in their unconscious, or they've got imposter syndrome. And so as a hypnotherapist, I'm helping people move outside of those limitations. So habits that people pick up, that are dysfunctional might be that they're unnecessarily anxious, or that they need a crutch like smoking or excessive alcohol to help them through stress. And so what I'm doing is I'm basically giving people more freedom. So when we talk about the true potential, rather than me install my model of happiness in somebody else, what I'm doing is I'm eliciting from them what they would like if they knew they couldn't fail. If they were living the life of their dreams, if they were living up to their true potential in relationships and health and career and finances and happiness, all that sort of stuff, what would their life be like? And very often it's richer than the life they're living. And so sometimes I work on specific remedial things, like weight loss or smoking. But other times it's aspirational. It's just, what would your life be like if it was 1,000,000 times better? And, and I suppose that's a sort of a very umbrella way of explaining it.
Sort of letting off a brake.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's the way I look at it, it's overwriting the operating software. The way I look at a human being is much more mechanically, which is we pick up, behaviors, we learn them, and many of them are functional, some of them are dysfunctional, and we can change and reprogram the dysfunctional ones through techniques like hypnosis, which allows us to communicate with the unconscious mind, which is the larger mind, which drives, most of our behaviors.
And your view is that kind of constant analysis, you're not anti-analysis, you're not discovering what the root of the problem might be. No. But where I think you differentiate from some therapists is that you need to reach a point where you stop talking about it, you stop analysing it, and you start to imagine a different future for yourself.
That's exactly right, yeah. So I meet people who've been in therapy for like 10 years, and they can describe their problems to you like a therapist. And they'll go, I have got all this disassociated rage towards my father, or something, like some mad gobbledygook. And it hasn't made a single bit of difference to their behaviour. Whereas sometimes I don't know what it is. I don't need to go back to the root cause. I just need to instruct the unconscious to make that change. It's a bit like if you took your car into a garage and you said, could you fix it? They'll go, I don't think we could fix it. So the goal of analysis is not to fix, it's to understand, right? And they said, well, we can't fix your car, but we can help you understand why it's not working, sir. That would be no good. So I'm essentially obsessed with output rather than understanding. But on occasion, yes, you might want to have an understanding because there might be a benefit in it. But rather than why somebody does it, I want to know how they do it. So if somebody says, I'm I'm drinking too much, we could find out, well, the why is maybe because I'm stressed, but the how do you motivate yourself? Well, I start to think of the clinking of the ice cubes in the glass and the drink pouring, and then that gives me a feeling, gives me a rush of essentially neurotransmitters. Or if somebody says, I'm frightened of public speaking, I want to know how do they stop themselves? Well, I imagine I get up to speak and everyone's looking at me and I'm going to, stumble over my words and they're going to laugh and they make a horror movie in their head, you see. So I'm from the school of how do you do it rather than why.
So how does it sit alongside things? Because some of the people that you've worked with have, PTSD, very serious kind of, significant issues in their life.
Yeah.
And we should also say, make it very clear, your book is very clear. Everything that you do, you're very clear. Listen, if someone's seriously psychologically ill, then of course that it's a doctor that they need to see.
Yeah.
But how does it sit alongside the sharper stuff that you do? How does that sit alongside, mental illness? Okay,
so probably the best metaphor I can use is when I was working with the military, you would, so sometimes two soldiers have been on the same mission. One's got PTSD and the other hasn't. And they've seen the most horrific, catastrophic stuff, right? And what it comes down to is what we would call coding, right? So the one that's functional has compartmentalized it, and they know that something bad took place, but they've coded it in the way they think about it. So it's over there and it's in black and white, and it doesn't have emotional intensity linked to it. The person that's in post-traumatic stress is still there. They're still in Iraq. They're still seeing their comrades blown to pieces, and it's going on and on and on. And what's happened is their brain hasn't disassociated from it. So nowadays we have a whole load of, fantastic techniques, because years ago it used to take months to treat a phobia. Now most phobias are done in 60 minutes. And in the same way, we've made this massive leap in the area of post-traumatic stress, trauma, depression, all these sorts of things that were very hard to treat, or mostly treated through medication, through what are called talking therapies like hypnosis. And also this new family of therapies called psychosensory. And, there's one where you tap on acupuncture points that works incredibly well for trauma and stress. The one I like, the Havening touch, where you touch here, 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 and here, and lateral eye movements, was developed by a Harvard neuroscientist, it's hard science.
Yes.
And these work incredibly well with people at that sharp end. And what happens there is, again, a different way of coding. So, for example, when you go through a trauma, 100 hertz wave travels from the thalamus in the brain, and what it does is it phosphorylates what's called the AMPA receptors, right? So it creates a biological change, so the brain is now different. And when you touch here like this feels comforting, or when the therapist does this, with the intent of because the touch of a predator is different to the touch of a healer. So when you touch here like this, because your mother held you in her arms as a baby, you're hardwired to release massive amounts of delta. Delta is synonymous with deep relaxation, but what it does is it dephosphorylates the AMPA receptors. It delinks the thought from the feeling. So what happens at the end of a Havening session is someone who's been through some trauma, they can describe it to begin with massive emotional angst. By the end, they go, yeah, and it was really terrible. But when you ask them to think about it, they're no longer inside it. It's black and white, it's dull, it's dim, it's like it happened a long time ago. So the coding and the biological structure in the brain has changed.
It's a process of basically making sure that the past is put in the right place.
Yes, that's right.
And
that's exactly.
And doesn't seep into your life as you move forward. So in the new book, you say at the start, if you follow my techniques, it will be impossible for you not to have a significantly better and even more amazing life.
Yeah.
Right, and that is in many ways a sort of demonstration of what it is you're arguing for, right? Because that is confidence. That is certainty.
Yeah.
Another certainty is that bad things happen to one extent or another to us all.
Yes.
So how does your approach, how does your philosophy more broadly sit alongside, the Stoic approach to life, which is essentially life is what it is, whatever it's presenting itself to be, it is. And your job actually is not to think that you can magically fix that, but instead it's all about how you react and how you behave, how you feel as a result of all that.
Yeah.
How do these two things sort of sit alongside each other?
I think this is a really interesting question. So, the modern father of stress research, Dr. Hans Selye, he said it's not what happens to us so much as the way we choose to interpret it. So all of us will have bad things happen to us in our life, but some people are more functional when it comes to dealing with them because of their perceptual filters, the way they've grown up, their beliefs about themselves, or their ability to adapt. Resilience is not just about pushing on through, right? Resilience is about adaptation. So there's something called the law of requisite variety, which states that the part of a system that has the most flexibility always ends up in control of the system, be it a family, a corporation, or a political party. So, these days, our environment is always changing. So when you can adapt to that, that makes you master of your own destiny. So what I'm doing, I suppose, when I work with people, is I'm helping them to process trauma and code it in a way where it leaves them more functional. Because you see, you can't change everything in the world. In fact, when people say to me, I want you to hypnotize my husband to be a particular way, I say, no, it starts with you, right? When you change, it's the Gandhi thing, isn't it? Be the change you want to see in the world. If you bring it all the way back to personal responsibility, if you change or you change your perception, then you change your response and your relationship to the crisis or whatever it is that's going on in the world. And that, I believe, is where the power is. Because some people come with what I call a victim mindset. They'll be, this is not fair, why is it always me, etc. And there's no power in that, right? And it's interesting, when I was writing this book, one of my friends who's it was before I was writing this book. He's a therapist and coach, and he has this thing around, you're either a victim or you're an owner, right? Not a victim mindset, that is, yeah. And he said, so Paul, you've had your ups and downs in business, and how do you feel about that? I said, well, yeah, you're right. People have stolen from me, or they've been bad, or whatever, but I chose to go into business, and I basically, should have seen it. And he went, oh, owner. Yeah, you're taking responsibility. Relationships. I went, do you know, I dated the same kind of woman and it ends in the same kind of way. And he went, victim. He says, I said, what do you mean? He went, what's the common denominator? And I went, And in that moment, things changed. I suddenly went, of course, it's not the other person's, they're not, it's not their job to make me happy, right? I've got to find my own happiness. And of course, I have. It's wonderful. Since that mindset changed. So that's one of the things that I try and do with people, is move them out of this powerless, victim mindset into one where they have more control. And, if we really take that much further, because what then sort of comes up is karma, right? And people say, look, you do good things happen to you. And I say, there's a lot of truth in that, right? That's a very sort of Christian way of looking at it. But if you look at it from an Eastern perspective, nice people get cancer, villains have their own super yachts. The way I see it is we pull to us the lessons we need to learn. Now, they may not always be comfortable. In fact, very uncomfortable and awful. But out of that, there must be some opportunity or learning. Or maybe that's just my sort of relentless optimism.
The manifestation piece, before I ask you to sort of explain it in a bit more detail, I think what you said to me is that you were secretly manifesting for quite some time.
Yeah.
So how did the manifesting manifest itself, Paul, is the question.
Traditional manifesting is writing down goals, right? And, putting pictures on a vision board. That's two-dimensional. And it works. People that are really clear about their goals, tend to achieve them, or have a much higher chance of achieving them, I should say. And that's very different to New Year's resolutions. New Year's resolutions are wishes, right? Now, if all we had to do was wish, I wish I lose weight, I wish I quit smoking. If all we did was wish, we'd all be living in mansion houses and, be fabulously wealthy and living a life of luxury. So for me, the way I do manifesting, two-dimensional goal-setting vision board, that's okay. Where a lot of people do it is three-dimensional. They imagine they're there and they've achieved their goal. What do they see? What do they hear? What do they feel? That's good too. But what I like to do is four-dimensionally and do it in relation to the way you code space-time. Right? So, for example, if I think about next week, it's there. If I think about Christmas, it's there. If I think about the summer, it's further out there, and the past behind me. Right? This is, most people do it like this. Some people have the past here, present here, future there, and some people it goes right. There's no right or wrong way to do it. So, one quick thing to throw in on that is, it's interesting. when I helped Stephen Fry lose weight, what he did was he got a treadmill, but he said, it's kind of boring, isn't it? And what he did was he found the 100 books, audio books that he wanted to listen to, and he used to listen to them on the treadmill. So he linked pleasure to being on a treadmill, right?
Yeah.
These associational links are powerful, like Pavlov's dogs, feed the dogs, ring the bell, etc. Now, I would find a way of linking pleasure to exercise, right? Of course, you get the endorphin release, but when you're doing a particular thing, if you say, like a lot of people do this, they listen to podcasts, so they listen to music or something like that to create an association link. But what I would suggest...
I love this, because your key piece of advice here for anyone listening to this is they should listen to this podcast more frequently.
Yes, absolutely. They should listen to this.
That's an excellent piece of advice. Or maybe yours.
Yes, either will do.
I don't think I have manifested the sort of successes of my life, but I definitely manifested how to get through the failures or the difficulties. So when I was facing some fairly long-running, complicated stuff, I would absolutely imagine sitting at home with the family, fire on, dog at my feet. Yeah, that was absolutely something that I was aiming at. Okay, and I had that picture very kind of
sure. So you class
clear.
So if I take it, when you think of your definition of manifesting, then it's totally focusing on something good at a time of adversity. You went, right, I'm going to get through this by imagining something good.
I think by your definition, I think I absolutely manifested a sort of safe place that I wanted to get to. And that's the point, is that this isn't just about, earning more, being more productive, a better life. It can also be, this is a podcast about crisis. Yeah. Manifesting can also be a tool to get you through something very tough.
100%, because, so if I look into my future now, so this year, two bereavements, and it was really heavy, right? And I look into the future and I know I'm going to lose friends and family, but also I know that good things will happen. And because life is finite, we treat it differently to if we knew we'd live forever. So it has a sort of a greater value in a sense.
I know also that you didn't manifest your wife, Kate, but you manifested a happier, romantic life for yourself.
Yes.
You were very clear about that. Just talk to us about that.
Okay, so, after, one of my friends pointed out, the common denominator, I thought, maybe I need to do a bit of work on myself, because I think, until... It's very interesting. There's a study into happiness where... people who are married tend to be happier. So originally the researchers thought, marriage makes you happy. But it's a longitudinal study. So they went, no. People who are happy in themselves are able to, or happy enough, are able to create functional relationships. And what happened was one of my friends, he's a life coach, he said to me, he says, I notice, you date some very nice ladies, but he's American. He says, but you don't like them. I went, well, what's that got to do with it? They're beautiful. They're sort of, they're wild. He says, no, you don't like them. And I went, yeah, you're right, actually. I have dated people I don't like. Yeah, and he goes, stupid thinking. And says, why don't you sit down and think, who do I love to be with? And who do I find attractive? And being a hypnotist, I put the two ideas in my head, went off into a trance, and it drew an Excel spreadsheet. And he went, Kate. I went, woo. I came out of the trance.
Kate is someone that you knew.
Oh, we worked together. Yeah. So we've been working together for like 30 years now. And I went, oh, this is awkward. Didn't know. I quite felt, I knew I loved her company, and she is attractive, very attractive. And anyway, we were in my kitchen a few days later, and we'd had a bottle of wine. And I said, tell me something about you that I don't know. And she said, I love you. And I went, oh my God, I feel the same way. And
she just declared it.
Yeah.
Out of a blue sky.
Well, an half a bottle of red, So what happened was, at first we thought, this is great, and then thought, oh no, this is wrong. We can't do this. This will end badly. And so it was very challenging at first, but we came through that. And funny, at the time, one of my friends said, the good thing is she knows you. The bad thing is she knows you, And so because she we'd gotten to know each other so well. I think it was a great basis, and we share similar values, or same values really, and so I found real happiness, even though it's very interesting, because I said to friends of mine, damn, I wish we'd sort of wasted all those years we could have got, and they went, never would have worked before because you were a different kind of person.
You weren't really.
And so was she. Yeah, exactly.
There are critics, including around the idea of manifestation specifically, but your approach, I think, has always been, look, I think you've given some examples of it in this conversation. Fair enough, your views are your views.
Yeah.
But you're wrong. Is that a fair summary of your view? You seem sort of largely unbothered by those who sort of criticise or who are sceptical.
I'm saying I don't care whether people believe. I'm interested in output. I've tried it myself and it works. Works over the last 40 years. I've done it with lots of other people. And if you look online, you'll find that lots of successful people will attribute their success down to manifesting, or they'll call it by a different name.
I mean, you touched on it there. I mean, without doubt, the conversation around these sort of subjects is changing. Hypnosis is now on the A-level psychology syllabus.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And you've played a big part in getting these topics into the mainstream. Do you think we should be introducing these ideas around the sort of untapped power of the mind even earlier in our kids' lives? I mean, we had a guest on the pod, Anthony Selden. I don't know if you've met him, who is a brilliant man and a brilliant headmaster among many other things. And he's certainly argues strongly, has done for many years now, on the need for us to be taking a much more deliberate focus, towards building resilience in young people and starting it much earlier.
Yes.
What's your view on all that?
I totally agree. I mean, it's all very well learning geography and history and stuff like that. It's great. But wouldn't it be nice if you learn very practical skills like how to have self-confidence when public speaking, or how to be as the super learning skills from mind mapping, in exam and exam confidence. Also, I'd go a step further and say how to fill in a tax return, wire a plug, etc. Sort of practical skills that we're going to need in the outside world. But certainly life skills is, I suppose, what essentially you're talking about. Yes, I think it would be a great idea if they were formally taught. I mean, I wish
life skills, but with this focus on the idea that your mind is capable of more than you think it is.
Absolutely.
And this is how you might access that. Now, some people might think, God, we can't possibly go down that road with our 10-year-olds. I don't know at what age you start.
But people say to me, who's the best hypnotist? I say parents. The things that the parents constantly say to you, good and bad, and also it's brain training in a sense. I mean, I remember asking David Beckham, how did you learn to kick a football, curve it and put it in a window that size, right? And he said, I went and got a tyre, tied a bit of rope on it, put it on a branch of a tree, and I practiced 1,000 times, right? Now, some people do it for real. Other people do it in their imagination over and over again and still get astounding results. So, in a sense, this mental rehearsal, which is what athletes call it, would be a really good thing for people to do in relation to anything that they want to achieve in life.
And, aside from achievements, which obviously can lead to happiness, achievements aren't the only ingredient that goes towards happiness, but also teaching our kids to understand perhaps a little bit earlier in life what may well be the ingredients towards a happy life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for me, the greatest success is happiness. So what's happened is since the 1940s, when we measure happiness levels, there's not really any difference. And, we're richer, we've got more freedoms, we're healthier, all these sorts of things. Why aren't we any happier? And I believe it's because we've confused pleasure with happiness. So real happiness for me is when I'm living my values. So just for example, if I can tick the box, do I feel healthy today? Because that's a big one, right? Bam. Do I feel loved? Do I love my family and friends? Do I feel loved by them? Yeah, bam, another tick. Do I feel creative? Did I do something? Yes, I did. Was I kind? Freedom. Did I get to choose the majority of things that I did in my life that day? Yeah. So when I look at my life in terms of living my values, suddenly I feel this sense of happiness.
Let's talk about gratitude, because I know that you're a great believer in keeping a gratitude diary. And that's another overlap with the Stoics, of course.
Yes, of course.
The importance of gratitude, the health benefits of gratitude. Just give us your view on that.
Okay, so there's research to show that people that regularly practice gratitude, have measurable increases in health. But I would say, looking at it psychologically, when you affirm how grateful you are. So what I would do, walk in the park, walk in nature, and I would think of the big things. What am I grateful for? My health, my family, my friends, the job I do, where I live in the world, the clean air, all the nice stuff, right? And the small stuff, first cup of tea in the morning, that TV show I'm looking forward to seeing, etc., my comfortable bed where I'm going to sleep. And when you do that, you affirm at the unconscious level abundance. So because you get more of what you focus on in life. This is something I live by. And a lot of people are thinking about what they don't have all the time. When I ask people, what do you want? They'll go, well, I don't want to be overweight, I don't want to be shy, I don't want to be single. So they're putting their energy into that, so they're reinforcing it. But when you think about all that you have, you say to the unconscious mind, look how much I have, I am grateful. Oh, wow, aren't I so lucky and grateful? And so what the mind does, it goes, okay, I'll get you more of that, right? So that, for me, is one of the sort of the simplest things you can do with the biggest result over time.
It's interesting. I've never heard the gratitude diary be described in such a kind of operational way.
Oh yes.
That's what's sitting at the centre of all of this, right?
Absolutely.
Is output.
It's output.
It's a system for you.
Yes, totally.
When you visualize it as a system.
Yeah, I see it as I said, I'm quite mechanical, which, again, some people go, how can you be? Human beings are, much more than that. I said, well, of course they are. There's loads we don't know. You can't put love under a microscope, but you can observe output. And then from that, you can make a calculation as to how you got to that output. And so when somebody's dysfunctional, you can change the dysfunctional system, algorithm that they've used. Or if they're highly functional, and that's the other thing that I've done over the years, apart from therapy with people, is I've studied high achievers and modeled how is it you think, how did you get through this? How did you create that? What's your way of handling this or that? Yeah. And so I've found core principles that apply to super achievers, and that to me is pretty fascinating. And again, I've used those myself because I go, what, you think about it like that? That's interesting. And
give us a particular example where you've learned from someone that you were working with.
I'll give you an example of what a lot of super achievers do is they go off into the future and they imagine where their business or service will be and what the problems and challenges, how the landscape has changed in the environment, what their competitors are up to. And they are almost able to look at it in a sort of detached way, as though they're looking at somebody else. And then they bring that knowledge back and they make a computation based on that. So for me, intelligence is partly about what you know, but it's also what you can calculate from it. So, I probably could come up with 7 different principles that they all have, which would be things like resilience, self-belief, it would be determination, it would be creativity and all those sorts of, things, and also connection, and just generally, so for me, when I talk about successful people, those people that have excelled in one area at the cost of everything else are not successful, right? So if you've worked yourself to death to have more green bits of paper, in the bank, that ain't success. That's sure, it's an achievement in a particular area, but my personal model, extends to balance. So, you've got to have your health in the equation, relationships, career, etc. That's why I went with those broad brushstrokes earlier.
Got it. Paul, this is brilliant, and thank you.
Oh no, I'm loving this. I don't normally get this sort of depth of question. This is great.
I'm just going to ask you some quick questions now, just as we wrap up. The best self-help book that you've ever read?
Because it's really tough, this is. I really liked, what really helped shift me was a book called Using Your Brain for a Change by Richard Bandler, who is my mentor, one of my mentors and teachers. He's the creator of NLP, co-creator rather. And it's a really simple book, easy to read, and yet you suddenly get a fantastic understanding of the mind. I mean, the book that started it all for me with hypnosis was a book called Transformations, which was also by Richard Bandler and his partner John Grinder. And so yeah, I would one of those if I had to. I can't say one. I have to say two.
Very good. Best piece of advice you've been given?
Well, it's the piece of advice I live by, which is you get more of what you focus on. I mean, I can think of other things that people have said to me over the years, like know when to leave the party, or which is
a good piece of advice.
Great piece of advice. Yeah, it's funny. I met David Geffen, and it's an interesting story actually. I was with my friend Simon Cowell, and Simon had rented a boat for the summer, and David Geffen pulled up alongside us on what was then the biggest commercial yacht in the world, right? And we were invited over, and these two kind of titans of the entertainment industry were sussing each other out. And I had a glass of rosé, and I thought, I'm just going to get stuck in. And I went, can I ask you some questions? And he went, sure. And I said, so, and there were lots of fascinating things, because this man is a self-made, entertainment titan. And I said, if you had one piece of advice, and he actually said, know when to leave the fair. And I said, well, what does that equate to? Well, I stayed with the manager of the Eagles for too long. Then I should have done this. And he broke it all down, And on the way back, Simon said to me, you should do, a TV show where you interview people, which I did for Hulu, which was a psychologically based show. And then I turned into a podcast. But we both said, what a phenomenal piece of advice that was, So that I suppose, if we're looking at advice given, it would be that.
Paul, amazing. Thanks so much for your time today. I think this has been a super useful, aside from being a very useful episode for me personally, which it has been. So thank you for that.
Well, I haven't talked about half of this stuff ever. So.
Well, I think for people watching, listening, this, it's particularly at the start of a new year. This has been super helpful. So another arrow out into the world. So thank you for that. If you've enjoyed this conversation, then please do leave us a review. And if you found it helpful or even inspiring, we would be delighted if you recommended us to your friends. It means an awful lot if you do. You can watch the full episodes on YouTube, follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and if you hit subscribe, you'll find a lot more crisis conversations. As always, full transcripts are available on our website, along with links. Just head to crisiswhatcrisis.com, and thank you so much for listening.